Hello, everyone. Ian Hamilton with Good Virtual Reality here, and thanks for giving us your time today. In case you're new here, you can become a subscriber at goodvirtuality.com. Many episodes of this podcast head out over email first to paid subscribers before publishing everywhere. Thank you to my founding members, paid subscribers, sponsors, and the donations I've received supporting the production of this independent journalism directly. Today, I'm joined by Justin Spice, one of the developers behind Iron Rebellion. Why don't you tell me where you're tuned in from today and introduce yourself?
I am tuning in from Raleigh, North Carolina. And yeah, I've been in the development space for VR for about 11 years now, right from the beginning, 2016, 2015.
So why don't we talk about that path a little bit there? I'll get right into those questions that I ask all my guests. What was your first VR experience?
Man, this is a good one. And I think it's probably pretty similar with a lot of people. I was working in New York City at the time, always interested in tech, always interested in using my design degree to perpetuate tech. And someone had brought in a Google Cardboard. And I was walking around with it in the office and everybody was trying to share it. And I was like, wait, this is actually really, really cool. And I'd heard of the Oculus Rift that was being developed, was following the whole Palmer Luckey journey and things like that. Ended up waiting 2 hours in line in Manhattan for this experience. I don't even remember what the experience was, but they were using a Oculus to display it. And I just wanted to understand what the tech was. And me and my buddy waited a few hours in line and I was in there like 12 minutes and I took it off and I was like, this is the coolest thing that's ever happened. And I actually quit my job, I think a couple weeks later because I was so compelled by it, moved out of state so I could afford rent to pursue this thing.
I know that feeling. Migrating for virtual reality, it's quite a common thing to
Mm.
reduce your cost of living in order to focus your finances elsewhere. And I've done that myself a couple times. Even though I'm on the reverse of that right now, I am living in New York. And all right, well, let's talk about your company here. What are the projects that you worked on between quitting your job and relocating? What did you sort of say, okay, let's build this?
Man, that's almost an embarrassing story because I was just doing solo. I was just like, okay, let's just get a developer kit and let's just see what this thing's all about. Was building these little prototypes, wasn't very good at it. I was an illustrator and a 3D modeler, just dabbling. I was using a UE4 at the time. I need a programmer, got online, had some art that could kind of leverage a programmer that may be interested, and found a guy who was really skilled. We were going to build couple prototypes, build a handful of things, see what sticks. Iron Rebellion was the first prototype and the game that ended up being worked on for the last 10 years. It was a lot of ups and downs, a lot of learning, a lot of wrong decisions. I was just committed to bringing what I considered a proper mech vision to VR. And so we just stuck with it. It's been one game since really the start.
Wow. So what was the release plan? I saw the release date was pretty recent on some of this. Was it in early access for a really long time?
Yeah, we went into early access, boy, quite a few years ago now, and then launched into early access about 2 years ago now. It's 2026, yeah. So a good 6 to 7 years in development. That we were building a Discord group. We had a lot of people testing internally. This wasn't just like blind throwing it out in the world to see if it would work. A lot of the development was genuinely because people were asking for it. People were just like, this is great, like, please keep going kind of thing. And so we had our kind of internal motivation that was validating it. The release date was quite a long time after we started development.
Got it. And so tell me about those super fans. You're throwing the game or early builds at the game at those super fans. Is that your typical iteration process? Is like, hey, does somebody want to try this out?
Typical iteration process. This is the first game I've ever developed. So yes, it is our typical iteration process. It's a little insane, I think, what I did. And it was a lot of just being naive and young, being ambitious and maybe a little bit cocky, thinking, oh, I can pull this off. How hard can it be? And then you're so deep in it, you're like, well, I might as well just dig to the other side kind of thing. And so I was shocked that anybody cared. I was shocked that I remember the first handful of like 12 people that joined the Discord. And I'm like, and no insult to them. I was genuinely flattered. I was like, don't you have something better to do than like hang out with us, our scrubby little game? And most all of them are still in the Discord and active. We started the Discord like a year and a half in. So going on 8 or 9 years, these people have been active in the Discord. And as that grew, so did our ambition and our excitement to finish a product.
Before we go too much further, why don't you break down Iron Rebellion? What's in the game? What systems are you on? And all of its features. Give that rundown.
I'd like to actually take it a step back a little bit and kind of explain where we were at early access and kind of where we are now. Because We were at a do or die moment with the game where we had to just get it out. And we kind of had the idea we're going to release one mech, one weapon, one map, one game mode. And that's what we're going to drop in early access. That did really well. That got us 60, 70,000 wish lists, a ton of conversions and things like that. So we're like, great, this is awesome. It paid our way. I was able to quit doing freelance on the side. Where we're at now is, my God, 6 mechs, a whole augment system that allows you to customize your mech in like sub-mechanical ways, giving buffs and things to certain areas, a huge list of weapons. I think we're on 14 weapons, including community maps, probably 25 maps, 5 game modes. We have an ability system where each mech has like a crazy ability. One is like dropping airstrikes, another one can fully cloak, one has an EMP, and that was really to break up what we call the tide of war. The game was very uniform from start, middle to end, and we wanted these big moments where a player could drop a giant protective shield over an area. And now the strategy would have to change. And we're really just trying to push further into how we can bring more strategy into the play space, all wrapped around obviously the cockpit interaction where you're interacting with buttons and joysticks and things like that. We also used to only have one cockpit, and we now have a cockpit per class, so heavy, medium, and light. Fully functioning mini maps with ping systems and objectives beyond a prototype, I think, to early access. And now I would say like it has at least my personal stamp of approval as like, this is a complete product. This is a complete game. And then obviously we're moving forward into the PvE section.
So, single player campaign and multiplayer, or is it only multiplayer? Break that down for me.
Yeah, only multiplayer. And this was a huge issue for about half the community, and it always has been. And we've always been very well aware of it. It had never been that we didn't want to fulfill what our community wants. It was that we really wanted to make sure the first half of it, the foundation of it, was incredibly strong, that the interactions between players, that the time to kill, that the weapon choices and all these systems really felt like the highest level of interaction of gameplay before we expand into that space. We have talked about it a little bit online. We have been quietly working on a huge update. It is massive. It's going to be about 2.5 years of development for it. It is a whole PvE, Faction Wars, Galactic map section that I would love to get into detail at some point. And so that's where we're headed to satisfy pretty much the other half of the player base or potential player base.
Interesting. You had to have seen a lot of challengers come and go. Riggs is the game that came to mind. I think that was an early PSVR mech game. Underdogs came out and is still going strong out there as like a strong single player mech game. There's been a bunch of attempts at mechs, not to single any specific one out. What was missing in those games that you wanted to bring to the market?
This is where the cocky comes out a little bit. In my mind, thought if I didn't build this game, it was not going to get built in the way I thought it should be built. I thought the experience or the vision I had for what a mech cockpit experience could be like in VR, I was like, there's no way someone's going to build this. And that was one of the primary motivations of doing this. This has to be done, and it has to be done right. I thought I had the vision. I think really the only other player in the space would be Vox Machina. They're the game that is in the space with you're actually reaching out and interacting with the inside of this machine in order for those to be translated to this massive mech you're piloting. I would say Underdogs is more of a punch beat 'em up in a mech suit, which is in the genre space, but I would never consider us competing in the same space. Same with Riggs. Riggs was on a PlayStation joystick, and you had VR vision in a mech suit kind of thing. The vision for Iron Rebellion was to allow a player to experience that MechWarrior 2, that Titanfall, that Hawken feeling of being in a gritty, greasy machine, that your interactions are translated out to the world and amplified in this massive lumbering machine. And it had to be done through physical interaction, not with a joystick, not with mouse and keyboard. That was a non-negotiable for us. And so making sure that the physical reach, the accessibility to buttons, the priority to, is this a life-threatening thing? It needs to be close to the joysticks that you're holding onto. Is it a system thing where you might have a few seconds. We can move it to a monitor where if you fumble and hit the button in a panic, it's not the end of the world. And so we almost had a layering system that demanded quick actions need to be close to home, secondary actions can be further away, and third ones can be even more mechanically fun to play with as like an experience in the cockpit movement thing. So that was what we were after. And that is what's really driven most people to play our game. It's a lot of flight sim people, it's a lot of racing sim people, it's a lot of mech players that all agree that the cockpit is the gateway to interacting with the rest of the game. And so I don't think any player has really dropped the ball. I think it has a lot to do with preference and the audience. Vox Machina, you can put your throttle in full speed and go make some coffee, and your mech will lumber slowly to the battlefield. We're a much faster, more agile experience. We call ourselves Slow Hawkin or Fast MechWarrior. That's where we think we slot in, and why we think it's so important to sell that vision.
Love that. Did you buy MechWarrior back in the day? I must have rented that game a lot at my local video game store and put a lot of time into the different MechWarriors that were on console.
This game came as a bundle with our Windows 95 computer that my dad brought home one day when I was 9. And I played the games that were on the computer, and that was one of them. And I was like, this is actually, you want me to sell you the level of geek? I had, as a 9-year-old, I took a cardboard box and I taped it to the CRT monitor and glued a bunch of buttons on the inside. And I had this like cheap, like flight joystick. And I would just sit in there for hours. Like I was really piloting, and the soundtrack and the music and the mood. I was just like, this is it, dude. It just came with the computer.
The thing that I remember most about it was really modding your mech to your
Yeah.
absolute preferences was kind of the key. I want to fight in this style. And you could really feel it every time you went out there. It was like, oh, the mech feels a little
Yes.
bit faster, a little bit stronger. I can accomplish this mission. And that's something you're building right into your game.
There was a map I remember in MechWarrior where I dropped all my heat sinks and put everything to my engine, and the goal was just, could I just run past everything and not even interact with it? Because it was an extraction. The only thing that triggered the mission success was to just get to a point, and they put all these enemies in between. So I had this build where I was just like, dude, I'll have no armor, no heat sinks, and no nothing. I'll just sprint my way to the end. And yeah, I loved just the crafting of a mech. And that was a huge part in our game too, to just be able to sit in the mech bay and look at your creation in this like VR 3-dimensional space was like a dream come true. So yeah, that's huge.
Give me your favorite memory in VR, your favorite moment of presence where you really felt where it transported you to.
The one that literally made me cry. It was the ending of Half-Life Alyx, and I won't say anything about it in case people haven't played it, but the ending of Half-Life Alyx, I don't exactly know why I got so emotional. I think it was partly because the story was just so cool and the experience in the end was just kind of like trippy. But I was like, whoa, this is what VR can be. Like this experience can't be touched by any medium. And I was just so engulfed in this experience. And I'm like, oh my God. I took my headset off and looked towards my girlfriend. I was like, I'm like tearing up right now. This is ridiculous. I think that was a moment that really made me realize how powerful the medium, and I'll say it specifically, can be, because I have, my gripes with VR in a lot of ways. That moment really, really stood out to me.
Let's dig into that a little bit because I understand the can be mentality here. I haven't put time into your game yet, even though I know you've got such a big fan base. VR, you tend to have to travel to these places. Your game is a destination and you got to install however many gigs the install is. You got to know how to play it and understand all these complex
Right.
interactions and put in this time investment to be sufficient at the game.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's really easy to kind of like reach that bar where I've put 3 hours into this thing and like, I don't need another game. I'm happy to just come back to this cornerstone experience. I find a lot of games like this in VR where it's like, I can go down the list of like Walkabout Mini Golf, Golf Plus, 11 Table Tennis, H3
Mm.
VR, all these games that kind of scratch an itch of a player who wants to experience a certain type of thing. And then they put thousands of hours into it. And so, like, it feels like you're trying to tug at a similar thing there with Iron Rebellion, with MechWarrior. Do you know that there's players that have put hundreds or thousands of hours into the title?
I'm blown away by some of our players. They absolutely whoop our asses too. It's crazy. I do not stand a chance against some of these players. There's a truck driver who has Starlink, and he just plays in the seat of his truck all the time.
Oh,
He's traveling, and when he's at his truck stops, he's playing Iron Rebellion with everybody, just like on the road.
Like, I gotta go to my mech truck where if my truck was a transformer, this is what I'd do with it,
I
right?
mean, he's
Like
got the best pilot seat of anybody, I feel like. To touch on that point, I genuinely believe that VR kind of like the concrete settled too soon for the possibilities of things that can be created. I think in a lot of ways we got into this port mentality. Let's port things that work on flat screen to VR, which works really well. But it's literally an entirely new dimension. And you add like spatial awareness and things like that, and like XR experiences where you can start geotagging and having like connection to the outside world and things like that. I really think developers should take that 2016 fresh approach and start over again, because I remember in those days when we were creating buttons and stuff, we didn't even know if that was a thing that was like you could do, because maybe it's too clumsy, maybe the tracking's bad. Like, how do you build a joystick? Like, our joystick is built in a very specific way because we were inventing this stuff. There was no rule book, and I think the rule book has kind of slowly just surrounded all developers, and like I think we almost need to throw that away and just get like really, really crazy again,
mm,
because I'm seeing titles already becoming these kind of repeats of repeats. I loved when you would like where like you're side questing games and you had no clue what it was going to be. And it was like the
mm.
weirdest experience. And like that to me was like just the most golden experience. And yeah, we've really kind of focused in. What I meant by like VR experiences can be good. They can be rich, but they can also just be kind of your next generic thing.
Yeah, I love that, the concrete settled too quickly is such an interesting thought to ponder, and there's so many different elements. People who are into VR like to point fingers at culprits, Meta, Valve,
Mm.
Sony, not putting a ton of money into their PSVR 2 library after some time here. Differences between the controllers, differences between, sitting, standing, room scale. There's so many different ways you can play a VR game. There was a period back in 2017 where people were buying graphics cards to drive beastly rigs in order to just have a great VR experience no
Right.
matter what they did. And then other priorities became the priorities of graphics cards. And it actually becomes harder even today to get a great VR rig. RAM prices are through the roof, and graphics cards aren't necessarily built specifically for VR experiences. In 2016, there was a move to make the minimum bar for good VR experiences cheaper and get the graphics cards down to affordable levels, and then make it easier to buy a PC that you knew would run an experience well. As we're recording this, we're at the cusp of the release of the Steam Frame
Right.
sometime here in the near future. Are you excited for that headset, and do you think it's going to change anything about the market?
Obviously, the price point matters, but I think it's the most seamless experience in VR I've had. You put it on your head and it goes. Linking to your computer is like I could never do AirLink with the Quest 3. It was just glitchy. It would get just pixelated and stuff. It's this thing is a beast. And one weird little thing that I hadn't considered that I haven't really heard anybody talk about is you have your whole Steam library there. It is the Steam interface. This is a consumption device for all the games you already know and love. And to just be able to sit and browse your library without any sort of third party plug-in, you put it on and I'm playing Don't Starve. I'm playing Terraria. I'm playing these games and just like this big screen natively. And it's awesome. That is interesting. I think Meta knows it because they are trying to bring all these Xbox games natively to their Plus subscription so you can play these games natively. And I think that's a huge selling point. It is my daily driver now. It is the best VR headset as just a generalized thing. Obviously, there's like some that excel in other ways and some in others, but as a general headset, it's my daily driver for development and all things gaming. That library part, I was like, whoa, this is so cool that I can just sit and it's like also you bought a huge big screen TV for all your games and things like that. I think it's a great device. And I think a lot of people that are very untrusting of Facebook and that situation will be okay with buying something that's a little bit more of a premium price, especially from a company like Valve.
There's a lot about this device that gonna feel like a real PC on your face, being able to install whatever software I want on this thing. It feels like Meta makes platforms, not VR headsets, and that's been the
Mhm.
experience of using their devices for a very long time, is like the needs of whatever platform they're building have come before the VR experience again and again and again. So like
Mhm.
the menu system, the features, all of it gets pushed in front of your VR experiences. And when you're talking about Steam Frame becoming your daily driver, it would be really interesting to do something like opening Iron Rebellion on my PC and letting it just sit there open. Maybe I wake my PC up from sleep, but other than that, it's just sitting there open. So 90% of the time on the Steam Frame, maybe I'm playing games like you're describing, right? I'm going to my easy haunts, Dome Keeper,
Mhm,
FTL, these games
mhm.
that are like mindless, get a little bit of a good feeling for just being really good at this game over time. But then the moment that I want to go fully immersive and take a trip to a destination, I press a button and boom, it's there, like within
Yep.
5 seconds, just bringing it up from my PC where the single destination is already open and ready to go. When you launch Iron Rebellion on Steam Frame, are you going to be running standalone? Are you going to be running PC?
We're getting really close to getting Steam Frame verified and getting it ready to be played standalone. We were gonna pair it with our update that's coming up soon. Just the pressure of getting this update out kinda trumped that because we wanted to announce it with the big update we're pushing. Normally, most games like our game runs on PC VR and Quest standalone, and for the Steam Frame, it runs on PC VR, and we will be getting it on Steam Frame standalone.
Vision Pro, for example, there's two games right now that have basically a cockpit mode where the cockpit is rendered by the headset and then the exterior is rendered by the PC nearby. And they're
Wait,
using
what?
foveated. Yeah. So in X Plane, they're using Apple's latest foveated streaming technology and they're using, I think, Metal, whatever Apple's rendering technology is, to render the cockpit locally and then stream assets from the
That's
PC
so weird.
because it's only a PC game. I have yet to experience this because I don't have a modern graphics card because it requires a recent generation RTX. If you go look at Apple's documentation, they specifically outline this scenario where
I wonder what the advantage is of that.
you use a high powered graphics card for the environment where you can really render a ton of detail. And then you render the local detail inside the cockpit using just the local rendering. One
Hmm,
of the advantages, though, that they're able to do with, I believe, X-Plane is also use the system's object recognition to bring in your joystick. It's your real hands on your real wheel or your real flight stick
hmm.
and then the cockpit is coming from your headset, and then the environment is coming from your PC,
Okay, so
and you
that
combine those
makes
3
sense
things.
because they're having to lace interesting the compute side on the machine would not be able to understand the depth sensors. If the cockpit needs to integrate your hands, your joysticks, everything you bring in, maybe that's like that has to be one package. And then the outside world doesn't care about that. It's just going to take the input of the game and what that's feeding. That's so interesting.
Mechs is the next thing, right? Like, you've got racing
Yes.
games, you got flying games, you need a
Yeah.
mech game that does this.
People ask for like, "Hey, can we bring HOTUS into the experience?" And we're like, it actually is on our roadmap, but a big problem with it is that if we bring HOTUS in, now all the buttons in the cockpit don't they go away because everything's on these two joysticks and you can't see the joysticks you're interacting with. It would be amazing to lace those joysticks into that cockpit space in your hands, and now, like, that's, like, an extreme level of immersion there.
I know that there are fans at the very high executive level at Apple who are fans of high-end simulation. And yeah, racing, flight, and mechs are my dream games that I want to see doing this. So yeah, just gonna recommend out there you go out and check out the SDK there because it does seem
Yeah.
like a match. I think Valve might do something similar down the line. Is there going to be any benefit visually to running the PC VR game instead of the standalone only game?
Yes, I think with most games, you have to dial some things back. We actually built in reverse, though. We built for standalone first, and we brought texture resolution, bloom, anti-aliasing, and things like that to a higher degree for PC. So when you get on PC, you're not getting entirely different model sets. Maybe LOD distances slightly, but unnoticeable. It really comes down to the quality of the headset. The Quest, it just has an inherently like almost a blurrier rendering on standalone sometimes. It isn't as crystal clear. And when you're jacked into your PC, obviously everything's just razor sharp with the anti-aliasing, but the overall mood, feel, lighting, model complexity does not change in our game. It's pretty much one to one.
Mm.
But it's funny. It's thin layers all stacked on top of each other. It does seem a little bit downgraded, but not like games I've seen before where it's like, oh, they really just hacked and slashed this thing to fit the Quest versus we wanted to build the Quest platform to be as robust as possible visually and then we're like, okay, now let's just tack on some things that will bring a little bit more life and juice to it, like bloom and things like that.
Did you ever consider flat screen, leaving VR, or porting, and talk about those 2 scenarios? How real were they for you over the years, and when did they happen?
Yeah, went back and forth with it for a long time, and we will now actually be porting to PlayStation and Pico here in the near future. And flat screen was always an idea. It's a kind of elusive, like, oh, the other 98% of the market. But what we realized was that we're selling a VR experience first. If you were to strip that away, w- come up short as just a mech game in comparison to Titanfall and Armored Core and things like that. And so it didn't feel responsible to release that as a standalone product because I think a lot of players could feel a little underwhelmed by it. Now that we are going into this PvE galactic map faction wars side of things, I think that's completely changed the equation. And we're like, it's layers upon layers of stuff we've added to this game where we really think it stands on its own. And yeah, we're very much considering a flat screen port. So that's on the roadmap for sure.
Interesting. So I understand both of those discussions, right? Rec Room is dead, and I have the story on the podcast here a couple episodes back of
Mhm.
explaining how they realized they reached a limit of how many people in VR they could actually reach. Like they're on almost all the headsets. Where they're going to
Right.
go from there? They're going to go flat screens. And then there's folks like Walkabout Mini Golf that abandoned their flat screen version after doing a lot of really good work on a flat screen version, but
Mhm.
realizing that there's just different markets, different needs,
Right.
and limits to what you can do. H3VR2 and H3VR1 focused on almost mundane interactions in VR, the moments in between the shooting of the gun
Yeah.
that are boring for button presses. But when you're mechanically wanting to mess around out there on a gun range, kind of fun to kind of toss something up into the air and grab it in your hand and seeing what kind of like tactile fooling around you can have doing those sorts of things. And
You've
it's
almost
just
just given me a script for our game. You kinda just described it. It was like hitting heal in a mech game, you hit a button. You literally
yeah.
have to select a sector, put your mech into safe mode, wait for a lever to come down, and pump it so drones come out. Like, we turn one button to this whole panicked experience. It's totally I love that insight there.
Well, I mean, and it's scary to think of like stripping that out back for just the button presses. It's a completely different audience, and what you said, everything about competing with Armored Core and these other games, like that's 100% valid. I'd be really curious to see how you land on making that transition. Is there anything else you want people to know about your effort with Iron Rebellion or what you're doing heading into the future?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say if you've heard of Iron Rebellion and you've seen what we've been doing, come take a second look. We are not the same game as early access, not even close. If you're interested in the game at all, we definitely highly recommend to at least wishlist it because the PvE stuff that's coming out, anybody that's viewed what we're working on is like, you guys are really going for it.
All right. Well, thank you for the time, Justin, and
Hey man,
good
this
luck
is
with
awesome.
Iron Rebellion in the future. I'm curious to see how development goes and understand that sort of lure to do different things, but it sounds like going back to that kid who had the cardboard boxes around his monitor, nothing's going to stop you from realizing that vision, I suppose,
Nah,
right?
never. Also, we're gonna make your list of, top VR games, so watch out.
I gotta get in there. I might wait for PvE mode,
Cool,
honestly, like,
man.
that's I'm a single
Christmas.
player type of person usually. Going after the environment is sort of my thing. H3 VR2 is Pistol Whip. Those are the shooter games that lure me, not the latest extraction shooters. You said December is your target for that?
Their target, yeah.
Awesome. I'll keep that in mind. I'll let you know if you make the certified good VR list. Before closing out, you're also on display at, VR Villa a lot, right?
Correct, yep. We both live in Raleigh, so it was a convenient little, space there.
What do you think of that effort, and have you gone to those events?
I've helped him during events just to see what it's all about. Awesome guy, works his ass off against the grain most of the time, just has a passion to bring VR to the world. That's literally his mission. He's paying out of pocket half the time, and the guy, just like us, just loves the cause and is trying to just promote it as much as possible. So, yeah, he's great.
Awesome. Thank you for the time, Justin. We'll talk to you in the future.
Awesome, man. Thank you.